Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander viewers should exercise caution when watching this program, as it may contain images of deceased persons.
WA has finally recognised Aboriginal people as the first Australians in our state constitution. In a couple of years, there'll be the opportunity to do the same in our federal constitution, as well as remove discriminatory clauses. But what are the Noongar people saying? Nikki McNamee reports.
Mr. Speaker, the Legislative Council acquaints the Legislative Assembly that it has agreed to the Constitution Amendment Recognition of Aboriginal People Bill 2015 without amendment.
The bill to amend the West Australian Constitution's preamble to recognise Aboriginal people as the first custodians of the land was passed in September 2015. Labor MP JOSIE Farah, an Aboriginal woman from the Kimberley, introduced the bill into Parliament in June, which then went on to receive bipartisan support from both houses. In the last 10 years, there have been 24 attempts to pass the bill through state Parliament.
Western Australia was the last state to have the amendments made on their constitution.
But not all members of the Noongar community agree with the move.
We don't need to be recognised. Come in to our law and culture, be welcomed in by our elders into our law and culture first and foremost, because that's the constitution of our people.
The constitution to us is basically an invalid rule book, for the illegal government that we have.
The Aboriginal advisory to government, they don't speak on all our people's behalves. They speak from themselves and their government position.
That recognition in addressing that we are the first peoples of this land gives us, as Aboriginal people, an opportunity to consult, to negotiate, to do bipartisan with the state of Western Australia.
Well, one of the things that's sort of controversial about an amendment in a preamble to recognise Aboriginal peoples, or any Indigenous peoples for that matter, is that in many cases it's specifically designed to have no legal effect.
In May 1967, a federal referendum was held to determine whether discriminatory references against Aboriginal people should be removed from the federal constitution. This section said Aboriginal people needed special laws and they shouldn't be counted as part of a census. The referendum saw the highest yes vote ever recorded in an Australian referendum, with over 90% voting for change. Despite the success, there are still parts of the federal constitution which can be used to discriminate against Aboriginal people. Former Prime Minister Tony Abbott proposed those should be judged by the people in another referendum in 2017, and insert new sections which recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples and their languages, as well as banning any future discrimination.
Why do we need to be in that? We're in there, why isn't every other Australian in there? I don't get it.
And I think it's important, but again, I'm not sure myself what that would mean ultimately in terms of any benefits or benefits in terms of improvement of many Aboriginal people's lifestyle and socio-economic status, education, low health outcomes. How much that will have an effect on that, I'm not sure.
It seems the majority of Aboriginal communities would prefer a treaty instead of a constitutional recognition, which would mean reaching a settlement between the traditional custodians of the land and the government.
A treaty is a way to keep the government accountable. A treaty is a way that gives us the power to go forward. We have the solutions, we're not issues.
It would mean, one, in a recognition that, in fact, Indigenous law has meaning within the Australian legal system, apart from courts or the legislature just recognising it.
Most Aboriginal people probably will be fighting for a treaty. Personally, I've got other things to do, and I think that the first stepping stone in recognising us as the first peoples of this land is very, very important for us.
Listen to the Aboriginal people, because it's not an Aboriginal movement. It's a government-led movement, it's government-funded. Give us funding so we can run a campaign as to why this shouldn't be recognised in the Constitution, would be what I would ask.
We're joined in the studio now by Fred Chaney, a member of the expert panel on constitutional recognition. Welcome, Fred.
Thanks, Kimber.
And Jim Morrison, the co-chair of the Bringing Them Home Committee. and also board members of Reconciliation WA.
Thank you.
Both of you.
Nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Fred, apart from what we just heard in the report, what other important things do we need to know about?
Look, I think the critical difficulty a lot of Australians have is understanding the ongoing place of our Indigenous peoples in this country, and that's now widely acknowledged in law post-Mabo. It's a fantastic step forward. The agreement between the State Government of Western Australia and the Noongar Nations, which is a really extraordinary step for Australia to take, is a sign of how much progress we've made. And I think what those interviews show is that at least some Aboriginal people don't realise how many gains they've made here and how successful they've been in establishing that they are a legal, ongoing part of this nation and that they've got, effectively, the capacity to make agreements, which I would call treaties.
Jim, what are your views on these changes to both the state and federal constitution?
Oh, look, I think that was a really important stage for us to go through. Sadly, Western Australia was the last state to recognise us in their constitution. But I think it's very important that we're recognised in the constitution for us to move forward. I don't think any big moves have been made in a range of areas for our people, and I refer to the level of disadvantage of Aboriginal people in this nation. And we just need to ensure that the majority of Australians understand that.
And Jim, what do you think constitutional recognition will do for First Australians, but also for all Australians?
Well, all Australians, I think, they need to be aware of the issues that I express quite often. And Fred and I are both in the reconciliation movement. We're not going to get true reconciliation unless there's a number of serious points to be addressed, and that's truth, justice and healing. And that's not just for Aboriginal people, it's for non-Aboriginal people too. By addressing and making people aware of the issues for a referendum, there's going to be a lot of issues that non-Aboriginal people will have to deal with. And to me, that's the truth. So truth, justice and healing is very important in the spirit of reconciliation. So advancing our own movement through the referendum and being fully recognised nationally is going to go a long way, I think, in addressing some of those levels of disadvantage. But as I said, truth is important and people need to understand the truth. Then we may go part of the way to look at the justice issues around that truth, whether that be compensation or some of the issues that have been very well recognised within the Royal Commission in recent times. And then we can look at healing for not just Aboriginal people, but all people, because 97% of the population don't understand those issues.
Do you think there is enough awareness in the community about this campaign?
Till the government and the opposition and the Aboriginal leadership can come to some sort of agreement about what proposition, what the form of recognition should take, we can't really close that argument off completely, so that we're still a work in progress in the business of recognition.
To finish it off, what are the next steps for constitutional recognition? What are we waiting on?
Well, again, I think it's a bit more dialogue and empowerment, discussion at an Aboriginal level, and that needs to be encouraged. I mean, there needs to be a bit more understanding, and I think that can be improved upon.
Well, thank you, Jim and Fred, for joining us here on Noongar Danju. It's going to be interesting to know what's going to happen next in constitutional recognition. So,
thanks, Kimber.
Thanks for having us.